Panama City Beach, Florida, March 26, 2001. In a bold and unprecedented move, Vince McMahon appeared in a simulcast of WWF Monday Night Raw and WCW Monday Nitro to announce that he had purchased World Championship Wrestling and completed his lifelong goal of effectively ending competition in pro wrestling. What began as McMahon purchasing Worldwide Wrestling Federation from his father had ended with taking the WWE from being a regional promotion to a virtual monopoly. He had dismantled the territory system, which, for those unfamiliar, was a series of agreements by which wrestling promoters claimed promotional rights for specific sections of the country, and in so doing he transformed the entire concept of pro wrestling to the point that most civilians believe that WWE and pro wrestling are synonyms, since no other organization has had nearly as much reach as his has. With WCW...
What you say? That you only meant well.
Deceased, we would have to wait nearly 20 years before another company, All Elite Wrestling, would be capable of posing a threat to this juggernaut. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Let's start from the beginning. Now, in the beginning, there were competitors, the biggest of which was Vern Gagne's American Wrestling Association, based out of Minnesota, and of course the National Wrestling Alliance, a loose conglomeration of territory owners who all recognize a singular world champion. World Championship Wrestling was the new name given to Jim Crockett Promotions, which was itself a southern wrestling territory that was one of the largest and most popular of the NWA, when it was purchased by Ted Turner. Ted, as it turns out, was still a little bit salty about a TV deal gone bad between him and Vince. And in fact, it went so badly that fans remember it simply as Black Saturday, but that's a story for another time. There's a famous story of Ted Turner making a call shortly thereafter to Vince McMahon, where he said to Vince, he said, "Guess what, Vince? I'm in the wrestling business." To which McMahon replied, "That's great, pal. We make movies." My terrible Ted Turner and Vince McMahon impressions aside, this particular Vince quote, for me, really does sum up his entire outlook on the art form of pro wrestling. WWE for years has considered themselves to not be pro wrestling. They define themselves instead as sports entertainment, which is, of course, a stupid thing to say. They've been hammering home that term for 3 decades now, and I still hate it. So when Turner told him that he wasn't in the wrestling business, Vince brushed it off because he felt that wrestling was an art form that was beneath him now. He is, after all, a movie maker. He is an important person. And anyway, all that is to say that WWE's twisted logic, none of these other wrestling companies were competition, and that we're not even paying attention to what they were doing because it's no big deal. They're just wrestling companies. We make movies, pal. And so it was in 2001. Like I said a couple hundred words ago, the WCW was the last of these not competition.
What you say? That you only meant well.
Fall as a result of what was then known as the Monday Night Wars. I'm not going to recap the entire war, but it shook out more or less like this. Ted Turner forms the WCW. WWE put on a program called Monday Night Raw. WCW appoint Eric Bischoff, a living Ken doll, executive vice president, which just means he's in charge. Ted asks Eric, "How can compete?" And Eric say, "Give primetime TV slot on Monday, opposite Raw." Ted say, "Okay." The NWO happens, WCW win for 83 weeks, and then they fall flat on their fucking arse, and they never get back up. WWF buys WCW for about $350. And from that point forward, we, as wrestling fans, face a very serious problem. The WWE could do whatever they wanted. And whatever they wanted was whatever Vince wanted. Meaning that their shows were most often written for an audience of one. And by the time 2019 rolled around, that one was an increasingly deranged and out-of-touch geriatric billionaire with a bunch of weird fetishes. The lack of competition was so detrimental to the quality of the WWE product that the fans were clamoring for an alternative. The first effort made was to divide their rosters between their 2 flagship shows, Raw and SmackDown, and that worked for a little while, but Vince's eccentricities flared up again when SmackDown started to become the more popular show, which for some reason made him mad? Like, success is success, you would think. But this, pretty sure, is definitely not the last time that we'll talk about Vince sabotaging something, getting over without his express approval, even when it would have made him more money to embrace it than to shut it down. And in this case, he essentially homogenized the product presented on both shows because he seemingly could not understand the necessity of variety. An attempt was made at a third brand then, in 2006, with the revival of Extreme Championship Wrestling, which was, ironically, the unofficial third competitor in the Monday Night Wars. Since Vince had purchased that in 2001 as well, he owned all the trademarks and could do whatever he wanted with them. I remember being very excited about this announcement at the time, having been a huge fan of the original ECW and having thoroughly enjoyed the two one-night stand pay-per-views that WWE had hosted in 2005 and 2006 respectively. But any true fan will tell you that the writing was on the wall pretty much from the first episode. As much as I legitimately enjoyed the Zombie, he was definitely not an ECW original. This show started as a genuinely watchable alternative with a different presentation than WWE's regular fare, but quickly devolved into a glorified developmental brand and absolutely tanked in the ratings until it was replaced in 2010 by NXT. Well, what the fuck is NXT anyway? I'm glad you asked, actually. NXT started as a game show on the Sci-Fi Network. The concept was a reality TV game show hybrid where rookies from Florida Championship Wrestling, which was WWE's developmental territory at the time, were paired with WWE pros and competed in challenges, such as promo contests, obstacle course, or goofy games, with the carrot at the end of the stick of humiliation for the entertainment of a deranged billionaire being that the winner earned a main roster spot and a title shot. They managed to squeeze in 5 seasons of the show in just over a 2-year period, and while there were many memorable moments, original Nexus anyone? It was a ratings dud, and it was cancelled after the 2012 season, but that was far from the end of the saga for NXT as a brand. Starting in June of 2012, NXT changed format to be an hour-long show on the WWE Network and rebroadcast on Hulu that featured young, homegrown talent and indie signees like Seth Rollins, Biggie Langston, Bray Wyatt, and Paige here. Rather than being recorded at the same venue before a Raw or SmackDown to a sparse and/or disinterested crowd, it was taped at Full Sail University in Florida at what would come to be known as the NXT Arena. NXT at this time became the official developmental territory for WWE, replacing Florida Championship Wrestling. And then in 2014, Triple H took creative control of the brand, and he used it to enact his vision for pro wrestling under the sports entertainment umbrella. Heavily influenced by ROH and New Japan, we started to see longer matches with a more athletic focus, and the show overall had a darker aesthetic. During this era, the 5 annual NXT TakeOver specials became must-see shows, often outshining WWE main roster pay-per-views with rising stars like Sami Zayn, Finn Balor, Sasha Banks, Bayley, Asuka, Kevin Owens, Shinsuke Nakamura, Adam Cole in the Undisputed Era, Tommaso Ciampa, and Johnny Gargano, just to name a few. It was widely seen as WWE's cool brand, and one of the hottest promotions in the world. This is the version of NXT that ended what we will know as the Wednesday Night Wars. Already high on success and accolades, this promotion felt unbeatable. Like the very best of the independent scene were having their time under the bright lights of the WWE, but in an intimate venue packed with passionate fans, who made themselves nearly as much a part of the show as the performers themselves. Arguably, the most successful of these super indie promotions was Ring of Honor, whose product took pro wrestling back to a more sports-like presentation. This aesthetic and presentation attracted major talent of the day, such as AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels, Low Key, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, among many others. They built on their branding and name value, and by 2014 they had established a partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and were able to share in the international popularity and successful merchandise moving of the Bullet Club, a cross-promotional group of cool heels, very much styled after the NWO, but, ironically. So they were actually really cool. Like, actually. Speaking of the Bullet Club, it was at this time that a young man known as Cody, just Cody, because the WWE had kept his name when he left, even though they weren't calling him that when he left, which is why he left. And see, this is another thing about the WWE. They are petty as fuck. Doing shit to people just to be doing it. They could have just been like, yeah, okay, that's a good point, that your dad had the Rhodes name before he came to WWE, so we don't really own it. And yeah, you can have it. They could have done that, but they chose not to. They chose to be dicks. So you can understand, then, why our friend Cody had a chip on his shoulder. He felt he had something to prove, and he was out on the indies during this period with the express purpose of proving himself to be the star he already believed he was, but that WWE would never let him be. And so it makes sense, then, that on May 16th of 2017, when a fan tweeted to wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer asking if he thought ROH could fill a 10,000-seat arena, Meltzer said not anytime soon, that Cody responded with, "I will take that bet." Now this was a tall order, since outside of WCW and WWE, no wrestling show had drawn 10,000 fans in North America since 1993, so it seemed as though their chances of success were about to drastically go down. It was then that the Elite, which is a subgroup of the Bullet Club comprised of the Young Bucks, who were Matt and Nick Jackson, Kenny Omega, Cody, and various others, had a grand vision for the event, and over time it seemed to be a bigger dream than what ROH could dream at that time. Nevertheless, spurred on by a groundswell of support on social media, the Elite instead imagined this show as the largest scale super indie ever conceived. It was dubbed All In. This show, originating from the Sears Center in Chicago, sold out all 10,000 tickets in a half an hour. The success of All In did not go unnoticed or uncapitalized on, for behind the scenes the Elite had caught the attention of a billionaire's son named Tony Khan, a rabid pro wrestling fan with aspirations of running a company and familial pockets deep enough to make almost any dream a reality. Tony managed to convince then his father, Shahid Khan, to part with some of his inheritance early, and with the power of money and, allegedly, cocaine, All Elite Wrestling was officially created on January 1st, 2019. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega were, without a doubt, the biggest talent in the world at the time to never have been signed with WWE. And now they had not only not signed with WWE, they were the executive vice presidents of a brand new company. Chris Jericho was signed shortly thereafter, bringing with him that name value that even the civilians could understand. And the roster included standouts from ROH and New Japan and the Indies, such as Hangman Adam Page, SCU, with Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, and Scorpio Sky, the Lucha Brothers, Darby Allin, MJF, Pac, Joey Janela, and Kip Sabian. It was then on August 31st, 2019, at the All Out pay-per-view, that Chris Jericho defeated Hangman Adam Page to become the inaugural AEW Men's World Champion, and Jon Moxley made a shock debut at the end of the show. And in a little over a month after this event, this roster of scrappy underdogs and grizzled veterans was set to debut a program called AEW Dynamite on Wednesday nights on TNT, on the same network that had hosted WCW Nitro during the Monday Night Wars. While at first it may seem like an antagonistic move to program on Wednesday nights when WWE was running NXT on the network, it certainly wasn't their intention. For one thing, WWE was in the internets. It wasn't even on regular cable television, so they're hardly competition in that respect. And a few key factors lined up, just as TNT wanting a primetime weeknight slot for AEW, but Mondays with Raw and Fridays with SmackDown being off limits, since it was felt that WWE was too much competition for a fledgling company, and TNT had NBA commitments on Tuesdays, and therefore Wednesday was the only slot that worked for TNT. And WWE turned it into a battleground because, of course, they did. Since they now viewed AEW as not competition, they began escalating their attempts to counter-program by moving NXT from being a network exclusive to a weekly television show on USA Network. And WWE being WWE, NXT actually got a head start, as they debuted on September 18th, 2019 on the USA Network. WWE had deliberately put NXT on USA a couple of weeks early, to establish a presence with TV viewers, to try to get some momentum before AEW's debut, and to try to peel away curious fans who might sample Dynamite. NXT fired the first shot by moving early, but October 2nd was the official opening battle of the Wednesday Night War, and AEW did not come to play. They came to win. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. How do I drive this car again?
This is a Wednesday night war. What are we even fighting for? Vince is a crazy old man. I don't think he's got a plan. This is a Wednesday night war. I forgot what we're fighting for.